I'm starting to have some more confidence in a possible severe weather event starting on March 4th, with some additional parameters starting to line up for later on in the week around March 8th through 10th, plus or minus a couple days. I'm going to be going into primarily looking into March 4th, looking at a lot of the ensembles that are giving me a lot of that confidence, and maybe even some of the severe weather parameters that I like to look at with the GFS and the Euro. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, starting off looking at the GEFS, which is the GFS version of the ensemble, or the ensemble version of the GFS. Getting my words mixed up. Looking at the 500 millibar, going to be looking primarily in this region right here, maybe a little bit to the west, maybe a little bit to the east. But I am starting to see this consistent trend of models having this trough starting to line up and ultimately into a closed upper level low like we see here. You can see that starting to form up. You can really start seeing it on the model run of 0Z on the 22nd, and it really starts to develop and continue. It continues to remain in place with each model run that we get. You can also see that with the Euro ensemble too. It is a little bit further west, but the signal is still there. That is what is really important, is that we're starting to see this trend of all the ensemble members starting to line up and creating this one giant mean of just pretty much where the biggest average is of where all the ensemble members are starting to line up. And you can see here there is an eastward progression of this trough becoming closed off and moving further east. So this tells me that this could possibly be a faster developing system based off of the EPS. The GFS was having a bit of that similar trend as well. It wasn't nearly as fast as the Euro, but it was there. And you can see here, it has that subtle, slower eastward trend, which is what I would expect to see, especially over by the Rocky Mountains. You have a lot more friction at the surface. The surface is, I mean, it could be up to 700 millibars, which isn't that far up relatively. 500 millibars isn't relatively that far up from 700. So we see that slower eastward progression with the GEFS as opposed to the EPS, which is something that I would expect. But we have a common trend amongst both of those ensembles, and that is what is the most important thing to keep in mind. Trends are your friend as a forecaster. That cannot be emphasized enough. A trend is good. That is something that you want to follow, something that you need to lead with. Another thing too is having this mean of the jet streak just ahead of the closed upper level low. If you have that, that means that there could be some more divergence aloft. You need to have more divergence aloft because it essentially creates a vacuum effect at the surface. If you have more divergence, more mass exiting the area, you're going to have, by common physics, you need to have something to replace that air. And so you're going to have upward motion from the surface, but there's still empty space because you have all that upward motion. You have an empty space at the surface, and so you have everything filling in at the surface. So you have that convergence aloft, you get upward vertical motion, and then divergence aloft. Divergence aloft is the key factor. You need to have more divergence than convergence, and this is something that's called the chimney effect. You have, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. You have like all that smoke from a chimney, it rises up and it just disperses out into the air. So that's what we like to see here. We like to see more divergence than convergence at the surface to have a deepening low pressure system, which could be a catalyst for severe weather. You can see on the 4th or beyond the 3rd, the ensembles really start to smooth out. This is expected because as time progresses, you get a lot more chaos and introduced into each individual ensemble member. And so it's gonna just create this large blob. On an image that isn't as pretty as this, you can see what each ensemble member, like if we look at, for example, the individual 570 line right here, you can look at each individual 570 line from each ensemble member and see where it's placed. And you might have some that are just way up here. You might have some that are way down here, and some that are, and a lot of them that are in the middle. That is where we get the mean from. Right now, the mean of the 570 line is right along Southern California and moving into northern Missouri. So that's what we see. We see that mean. But this tells me is right now we have a really strong mean of the 564 line having this shortwave trough starting to develop around somewhere around Nebraska. This is on the 4th at 18Z, so this is early afternoon Central Time on the 4th. But you can really start to see this smooth out as we get further into the forecast. But this is where the secondary storm possibility really starts to come into play. Typically, when we have something this far out, 210 hours from the originating forecast hour, it's usually a lot smoother than this. You have a lot more west to east motion. Right now, we are having this really prominent trough starting to set up in the desert Southwest. This is a really classic key indicator of a severe weather event possibly starting to show up amongst all the individual ensemble members. And you can see that same exact thing with the EPS as well. You have an even more prominent, possibly even closed upper level low starting to really show up on the 6th, the 18Z. Again, this is around the afternoon time of the 6th. Really starting to see this play out, really starting to organize, I should say. If this trend continues, which I think it will, based off of some other things that I've seen, this has the possibility to become one of the more prominent severe weather events of the early season of spring for 2026. So going back to the March 4th threat, I'm going to look at the low level jet now, still afternoon time of the 4th with the EPS ensemble. Not really much of a strong signal of a low level jet, but there is still something that's showing up here. We got a consistent 15 to 25 knot low level jet. Granted, this is pretty smoothed out. The closer you get to the surface, the more inaccuracies there are with forecast models, just because you are introducing more friction into each parameter. So seeing this streak of blue here is a telling sign of a possibly not really strong low level jet, but strong enough to introduce some increased moisture flux into the forecast region that I think could have the severe weather, which I believe is going to be this general area right in here. North Texas up into Kansas, possibly even western Missouri, western Arkansas, the far northwest corner of Louisiana, and so on. Now, if you look at the GFS deterministic model, you can start to see just shot after shot after shot, round after round of closed upper level lows that could be a primary catalyst of severe weather. So you got one right here, you got another one right here, and then you got one starting to develop in the Pacific Northwest that follows behind it right here. And so having these round after round, granted this is extremely far out, but I mean we've seen scenarios like this play out before where the atmosphere has a memory. It's hard to grasp, but it's true. The atmosphere is it takes the path of least resistance. And so if we have one weather system taking this path right here, going this way, you're gonna have the next one follow a similar track right here, and then the other one just it's all in that same general region. So shot after shot after shot of possible severe weather. Active weather, yes, there is going to be somewhere that is impacted by some sort of significant weather, whether that be a winter storm, whether that be tornadoes, flooding, whatever. There is the active pattern that is returning again after we've seen it play out last week, the week before. Just this is very common to see in transitioning in a transition season, with meteorological spring being on starting on March 1st. That's typically around the time when we start to see more severe weather play out. And so seeing this pattern, this consistent pattern of just round after round of severe weather, is a telling sign that at least one of these, it should have some sort of significant weather impact with it. I believe that this first round isn't going to be nearly as severe as the second round, which we see right here, starting to develop. And then the third one is still way too far out to say what exactly is going to happen. So just putting that third one out there on the radar for you. I'll keep you posted. But right now, going back to that first round of severe weather, we have this strong closed upper level low at 500 millibars. It's pretty significant because you have the jet streak that is downstream of this this trough right here, and so it's able to essentially dig out more of that mass. And you can see that here, 561 decameters. Go ahead a few hours, 558, a few more, 555, and so on. So you start to see that play out. You start to see the jet streak starting to amplify. That is a good indicator of severe weather. And then looking at the jet stream, or the low level jet, I should say, not the jet stream. The past 6 model runs have this consistent trend of a strong low level jet originating in North Texas all the way up to even parts of Missouri. This is a consistent trend. Remember what I said before, the trend is your friend when forecasting, especially for severe weather. You can see this trend play out here. It is a lot more widespread on the 18Z model run from the 24th. It does go all the way up to Canada, but I'm just, again, focusing on this primary region right in here. And so you can see it is that consistent trend of a strong low level jet upwards of 65 knots, which is incredible. That is super strong. That is super fast. If we see that play out, that's more fuel being introduced from the Gulf with that warm, moist air being transported through Texas, up into Oklahoma, and even parts of the Kansas City metro area. Now, again, this is pretty far out. This is 174 hours out from the originating forecast period. Again, this trend here from the past 6 model runs is a telling sign there could be something on our hands. Now, if we look at the CAPE, I'm going to look at the surface-based CAPE. You can start to see that play out. You have this tongue of increased CAPE start to occlude in on itself right here, and it's a consistent pattern. It's a consistent trend with those 6 model runs, just like how the low level jet had. You have CAPE up to about 1300 joules per kilogram. It does die off a little bit, but I'm not necessarily concerned about what the numbers are right now. It's still really far out. I'm just concerned that there is CAPE, regardless of how much it is. There's CAPE. Now, if it were a much higher number, like for example, like if we saw like 2000 joules per kilogram, that would be an even stronger signal than what we have right now. But regardless, we have this signal here. It's important. I feel like it is something to note for sure. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making this forecast. Let's take a look at the Euro mixed layer CAPE, and you can also see it is not as it's not as trendy as the GFS is. I think it's still trying to line up with itself, but I mean, there's still a presence of CAPE in this general area, with the exception of a couple of the model runs. So the trend isn't as strong with Euro, but there is still a trend of CAPE, of buoyancy, fuel. If we look at the lapse rates, I typically like to see above 7.5 degrees Celsius per kilometer. I investigate around 7 degrees Celsius per kilometer. Anything less than that, it's pretty difficult to prove yourself that there could be the potential for at least tornadoes. The lapse rates aren't all that impressive on the latest model run. There is no really consistent trend with the Euro, at least, of having strong lapse rates. If we look at the GFS, we can see there's also not much of a trend either. So this is one of those parameters that is, I'm throwing it out right now to look at later on. But right now, we have seen this trend of a strong low level jet. The ensembles are having that support as well. The ensembles, again, are having a really strong signal of a closed upper level low making its way through the four corners and into classic Tornado Alley. So with all that said, that is part of that's really the strong reason as to why I think we will have the strongest, or we'll have the start of the severe weather events day after day, starting on around the 4th, plus or minus a day. I hope this helps keep you informed. I hope you stayed throughout the end of the forecast. If you did find it informative, please do not forget to follow, like, share, everything. You can find me on Facebook, Doodles Weather Updates. I'm also part of Tornado Tacklers, which we are on Facebook and YouTube. So please drop us a follow, like, comment where you found the team, and I will keep you posted as this situation begins to develop.